Hi,
Hi,
Devika.
hi. Hi, Sangeeta.
How are you?
Good, good. A little nervous as usual.
No, no,
Always
don't
nervous.
be. No, I think this
Great.
is going to be fun, so don't worry about it.
Oh, I'll take your word for it.
Yes.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. Okay,
Okay.
well, we have people joining, so
Okay.
I think we can get
Okay.
started. But just before getting started, everyone
Ah,
in the comment section, can you just give us a thumbs up so we know we're not talking to ourselves and that you can hear us? I'll repeat that. If we're audible, please give a thumbs up in the comment section so I know that you can hear both of us and we're not talking to ourselves.
is there a comment
Yeah, yeah,
section you
yeah,
can
there is.
see?
Can you
Okay.
see it?
Yeah. No. I can, yeah, now I see people.
Yeah.
It's all coming up from the, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
Reading Span. Thank you, Reshma. We're audible. Great. Okay, great. So we can get started then. So, first of all, welcome to another episode of Book Talk, everyone. This week we have with us Devika Cariapa. For those of you who don't know, Devika is an archaeologist by training, but she has written a number of children's books in the space of nonfiction history and archaeology. She's written a bunch of books with Tulika, three books. In fact, one of her books, India Through Archaeology, Excavating History, won the Sahitya Academy's Bal Puraskar award in 2019. So good to have you here, Devika. Really excited to chat with you.
Thank you, Sangeeta. And um, very happy birthday to Tulika and
Yes.
everybody there.
Yeah. We're celebrating the whole month, basically.
Yeah, that's a good way to do a
Yeah.
birthday.
29 years,
Yeah.
and we're glad that you've been a part of it as well, and so happy to have you here.
Absolutely. I'm delighted to be here. Really delighted and honored.
Yeah. No, but really, so Devika, just kind of diving in, I think the first thing, at least, I want to ask you is how did writing really begin for you?
Writing for children
Writing
or
in
just
general,
generally?
and even for children.
Yeah, writing was always a big part of our lives. When I say our, it's like people who grew up in, say, my generation,
Okay.
because there was a branch of English, the subject in school, which was called composition.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you ever have that?
Yes, I used to
So
love my English exams, and I always used to leave composition towards the
there you go.
end.
But it was composition, and it was such a rigorous way of entering
Yeah,
writing because the teachers took it very seriously. Your grammar, the way you compose, the way your subject matter, what you was, even your conversation. Whether it was correct or not, or language, everything, spellings particularly. So that kind of set up this. We all loved it in school. We all loved it, and we would all like produce. Apart from school curriculum, we'd be writing all the time on weekends and so on. Some of us, who shall remain unmentioned, started books that ended at a chapter one and a half when we were like about 10 or 12 years old. So the love of reading and the love of writing was always there.
that's it.
So I would say it started a long time ago, but then you go through
Yeah,
phases, like,
yeah,
you're in your bachelor's degree and then master, and there's no time for that kind of creativity. So it's on the back burner all the time.
yeah.
But I would say once a writer, always a writer.
That is true.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But then, how did you kind of get into the space of writing for children? Because, like I said, you are an archaeologist by training. So, how did that happen?
That goes back to when I was being trained in
Okay.
archaeology. That was a very long time ago, I have to say, almost in the BCE era. Uh, you know, the thing is, I discovered two things when I was studying. Firstly, I'd studied history and then I went to
Mhm.
archaeology. But archaeology kind of revealed to me at that point what rich material heritage we have. It
Mm.
is really, it is just unimaginable, the material heritage we have. And the other thing was the kind of work that was being done by the academics of our country is so underrated and underestimated, unsung. My professors were my heroes because they did such world class academic work, but
Yeah.
not much of it was disseminated to the public.
Mm.
Nobody really knew that at point, that this kind of geological work was going on, zoological, botanical, all the evidence of human habitation in India in this very in a very rigorous kind of a way. So that was one thing that struck me even then. And then there was the magic of archaeology itself. Like I'll give you an example. Like,
Yeah.
we're walking. I studied prehistory,
Okay.
so it's way before writing and anything else was invented, really. And there's so many prehistoric sites and evidences in India. We're walking along a dried up riverbed, and among the hundreds and thousands of pebbles that we're like tripping over, you spot one,
Okay.
and the professor will pick it up, and he or she will say, okay, now this is different. This a human hand has touched.
Okay.
How do we know this? There is evidence here, and then you learn to read that object and say, okay, this was held by a human 100,000 years ago, and something that that human did has contributed to the heritage that we have today, what we are today, somewhere along the way. So that kind of gave me this idea that there are stories here that need to be told in a very approachable way, whether it's for adults or children. But it did take me many, many years to actually start writing those stories, because I wanted it to be something that children would be able to access and enjoy and put things into perspective and so on. That's how I started writing archaeology, particularly for children.
Yeah, because I mean, you are predominantly writing, in that space. So then, because you said like it wasn't easily, sort of accessible to the public, and especially to a younger reader, it's a very different sort of, approach to write itself. So
Yeah.
then, what do you find most challenging then about approaching information like this? Because you have to kind of make it accessible to kids, right? So how do you approach it then when you're writing very factual, technical information to be conveyed to a child? How do you kind of go about that? Like,
Of
what's
of
the most challenging for
of
you?
my particular field of
Yeah.
nonfiction, I think the most challenging is the research. Like
Okay.
you research, and then you research some more, because you need a whole heap of research before you actually find that one little thread that could connect you to a young audience. Which means that if you were a researcher, for instance, and you were an academic researcher, you're very clear about what you're focused on that one evidence or something like that. It could be a widespread kind of a subject. But when you're doing this, when you want to make something approachable, you need a ton more.
Mm.
You read very widely, the perspective has to be very broad, and then you pick out something that hopefully will resonate with a young reader.
Yeah.
And then you use that to approach the other material. So that I would find that the greatest challenge, I think.
Do you remember, like, maybe how you, like, I'm just going to quickly show the book here, like,
Yeah.
say for this one, Excavating History, do you
Yeah.
remember, what it was like, while writing it and kind of making it, say, simple enough for kids to understand, but also still giving them the information you need to?
I, I, I wrote a couple of them as essays,
Yeah.
a couple of the chapters as essays. After I had mulled over, for instance, the first chapter on prehistory, stories from stones,
Okay.
the early people, the prehistoric people, I wrote that after a very long time of mulling over the prehistoric stone tools that we have.
Okay.
And it I would literally walk around with this stuff in my head going around, like, how do I, it's a very dry subject.
Mm.
Prehistory is an extremely dry subject.
Yeah.
There's nothing, sort of very melodramatic or Indiana Joneses about it. So it was yeah, and then I remembered that in Chennai, there are actually the first two tools, which were discovered by
Mm.
Robert Bruce Foote. And I used that as an approach, because I thought at some point, some children are going to be able to go and
Mm.
see this. And then they should be able to put that in a context.
Yeah.
Why is this, this rather sad looking piece of stone so significant for us, so that was what I remembered. And then of course I met Tulika, and everything changed and it became India through archaeology.
Yeah, and no, it's a lovely book. And of course, I mean, even like it's so great that there are pictures to also just accompany the information as well. But then, you mentioned research is important and you research a lot. Is there a specific, again, approach you have, a process for research that you follow?
Well, it depends on the subject. Like, for instance, India through archaeology
Yeah.
has, I'll just show it if I may.
Yeah, yeah,
It has these, the
yeah. Mm.
chapters like this. So each one of them approaches Indian archaeology sort of chronologically from prehistory to almost modern times. But I used particular materials to approach each
Okay.
era, so to speak.
Okay.
It's not so sort of hard and fast what the dates are. For instance, the first one was about stone tools. The second one was cave paintings, prehistoric cave paintings. There's a chapter on coins and what they
Yeah.
might tell you, pillars and what they might tell you. So material evidence leads to this amount of information that you might have, and also very particularly what you might see around you, so that you can connect today what you're seeing to what it was originally and how that has changed. So I wanted the context of that in today's world to really come out. I think
Okay.
that was because, if a reader, young reader, looks at it and says, "Oh, how is this relevant to me anymore?" That
Yeah.
was the question that I really wanted to sort of put out there and say, okay, this is why it's still there. Like the Ashoka lion is still there for you. There's some concepts that some of these people came up with, which still exist in our world, and we still use it very casually without knowing it's so many years old. So the context was very important as well.
So then, how do you then approach it? Because then you've also done Game Changers, which is about people. So then
Yeah.
I would assume it's different for that one. How did you kind of do it for this then?
This
Because
was, this was our COVID baby, to be honest. A little earlier than COVID, actually. Um, a little earlier, I have to say. This was, again, it, between the editors, Radhika and Dia, were very, sort of, we had a list of people, and you had to narrow it down to who actually
yeah,
were the game changers of India.
yeah,
And we had a list of almost 100 to begin with, and then we had to narrow it down, like people born in this particular time. And then, we wanted people from different parts of the country, men and women from various fields, not just politics or music. It's music, it's dance, it's art, it's literature, it's medicine, it's nuclear physics, it's everything. So in that sense, it took a while to make the decision who those 25 game changers would be. Then the research process started. Like each one of them, I would deep dive into their lives and pick out something that I thought, again, that a young person would not necessarily have heard earlier.
okay,
Because some of them are very great. There's Rabindranath Tagore, there's Mahatma Gandhi, there's Nehru. They are game changers, so you can't leave them out. But what is new about their lives? What is different? Ambedkar, for
yeah,
instance, everyone reads about Ambedkar. What would resonate? So I started with his experience in school.
okay,
What kind of sad situations he faced in school, and very traumatic situations, which then made him the adult that he was. So I thought maybe a child going to school and facing some issues like maybe bullying or isolate. There's so much that a kid can go through in school. That would probably say, okay, wow, he went through the same things as me, and then he became Ambedkar. So Ambedkar is
yeah,
human, and they're not hagiographies. They're all. I start by saying that, look, none of these people were flawless, and they never claimed to be flawless.
yeah,
So if we're judging them from today's standards, that wouldn't quite be the thing to do, because they did the best they could at that time with the knowledge that they had. And some of the flaws were presented in the book as well. So I very much approach it as perhaps a historian would, like take it and use it, and it's warts and all. Everyone is warts and all.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's an interesting way to look at it. But now it's really fascinating because like there's a lot more nonfiction out there for children, and it's kind of just growing and evolving into its own sort of space and genre. And creative nonfiction is really a thing now. But how do you kind of view it? Because you've been in this space for a while, and now it's I think really grown into something else, and it's still growing. So how do you kind of view it?
I I find it phenomenal. It's just sort of exploded, and like my first book is 2017, but since then it's not been so long before. It's just not even a few years. It's just exploded there. I see books every time I go to a bookshop or say a Lit Fest bookshop or something like that, or I meet authors who've been writing creative nonfiction. It's phenomenal how it's exploded. It's very heartening
Okay.
because it covers various subjects, like there's science, there's art,
Yeah.
there's music, there's there's of course history is a great favorite of a number of people. um, what is also interesting is the formats that they
Mm.
use. It's not just like earlier fiction, non-fiction was about presenting information in a slightly didactic kind of a way, where you try, oh, the reader has to be educated, so I will, put this on. It's like sort of a borderline textbook. They meant well, I think,
Yeah.
but it had not evolved enough
Yeah.
for now there is this mixture of graphics and photographs. I mean, look at excavating history.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. Tulika, thank you, Tulika. Look at Ashok Rajagopalan's
Yeah.
illustrations. There are photographs, there are comic strips, there are maps, there are all sorts of bits and bobs that a child can dive into and come back. And also, a number of writers are now using the more creative kind of approach. They're not necessarily trying to sort of put away their own opinions, or some of them are mixing a little bit of fiction so that it's more readable or more approachable for. So I think it's going to really, we're going to see a lot of changes again in this nonfiction space. I find it, and the publishers themselves now are much more, I think they take many more risks, because I think Tulika took a big risk with Excavating History. It is such a beautifully produced book. It is expensive. I think at the time it came out, it's possibly one of the most expensive books in the Indian children's literature space. So now I see a lot more of that. Like I see more colors, I see more glossy pages, I see experimentation in terms of how the information is presented. So I think it can only be good for young Indian readers.
Yeah. No, but do you also maybe see like these kind of books being used in the classroom, for example? Do you see them fitting in there, or where do you see these books fitting in?
I'm a bit ambivalent on that, because
Okay.
I know that excavating history is used in some classrooms, but this is in a sort of a more light-hearted vein. I fear that children are being forced to read them by the parents, because the parents say, oh, look, here's something that will add to your education. I would like, really, in an ideal world, I would like the child. Look, the curriculum has its place, and most of the curriculums out there are very well thought out, and they are relevant to the kind of children who study in those schools. It's just the way this perhaps the subject is taught, and everyone says they hated history in school, but they've started enjoying it now with the amount of nonfiction that's
Yeah.
coming out from historians and so on. Um, I would ideally like a child to go and pick up the book themselves.
Yeah, that's fair.
Children have very specific interests. Like there's a young child that I know who apparently is obsessed with spiders.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, and apparently finds a collection of books on spiders written for young people.
Okay.
Of course, there are the dinosaur fans who always find good nonfiction on dinosaurs. There's people who love the
Yeah.
stars, or So if that can be encouraged, like the parent sort of gives them a free run and say, go pick it up, and then those books are available to you in India by Indian authors. What could be better than that? What could be more exciting than that?
Yeah.
Versus if your teacher tells you, you must go home and read Excavating History because it'll be good for your history. And then I'm imagining the child will be like, okay, maybe not. There's enough to do already. I would like that sort of a. Having said that, I'm very delighted when readers come up to me and say, look, I didn't like history till I saw your book. And the
Oh,
book was because it was in school. It was given to them in school as a sort of a supplement, or they say maybe you can do your research
yeah.
through this, or something like that. So gratifying, but to be treated with caution is what I would say.
No, that yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. That's fair
Yeah.
because yeah, I think the minute you introduce something as a textbook to a child, it
Yeah. Yeah.
automatically becomes a
Yeah,
bit.
they have the antenna. They know when the textbook is approaching the table. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, but like I said, it's amazing to kind of see these different formats, like you mentioned. And speaking of different formats, you've also written Uncle Nehru,
Ah.
which is a picture book, which is again very different from Game Changers and
Yeah.
Excavating History.
Yeah.
And again, lovely illustrations by Satyar Gade.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, some really and I'm just going to show one spread which I really like, which is
Just
this one.
just beautiful. Yeah. It's lovely. Yeah.
But what was it like working then on a picture book, which is so different because it's much more of a storytelling format as compared to, I would say, the other two books you've written, is what I would observe. But so
Yeah.
what was it like for you to work on this one in particular?
Yeah. So one of my secret desires, which I shared with Radhika and Dia, was that I always wanted to write a picture book
Oh,
because
really?
I loved them. I loved picture books. I loved reading to my kids picture books, and I used to have these voices in my head of like uh, repeating some of the lines that I had read. When my kids were small or something like that. And they were so fascinating to me. It was fascinating to me that I still remembered them. So the picture book was very much there. And then this idea came up about Nehru's elephant diplomacy, which, connected India, it connected children worldwide and so on. And it was a great idea to do it as a picture book. But the research process was very different
Yeah.
because in the other two books, I had this vast,
Yeah.
almost endless amount of research. In this, it was very specific to Nehru and how many elephants he sent to various children in the world. So it was a very pinpoint kind of a thing. Having said that, I did have to deep dive into the archives and say, okay, how many of the stories that we hear are true? How many are, where are the letters? Are they physical letters that he
Okay.
wrote and so on? So it was a different research process. And then telling the story, it was very interesting because as I wrote, I realized that it was much more complex than I had previously imagined. I
Okay.
thought I was writing a very lovely story about these elephants who went. Then then I realized that look, times have changed and nobody would really send an elephant overseas the way they did earlier. So why did he do it? Uh, Times were different when he sent. What were those different times? Because it was just post independence. India was a very poor country. Children reading today would not resonate with the kind of India that was there at that
Yeah.
time. There was a reason for it. So the idea of diplomacy came in. What is diplomacy and how is it executed by world leaders? What does it even mean? So all these little elements started getting added on into the book. And the story became slightly more complex as I went along. And of course, Satvik Gadi's illustrations were just phenomenal. So you get kind of, when you're doing a picture book, I realized that was my first, hopefully not my last. Uh, there's a there's that, you see Satvik's illustration and you say, okay, now I've got to sort of maybe describe a little bit more here, one more line there. And then comes the paring down
Yeah.
because you can't be too, you really have no leeway. You have to be very minimal in your storytelling. How much of that story are you going to tell? What is important? So very different kind of a process.
Yeah, yeah, because I think even the visuals really like complement what you're saying, and they kind of
Yes,
do
yeah,
some of the job of actually showing the reader, what's going on in a sense.
absolutely. Yeah, I think Satvik did as much research as I probably I did because all of his are, they're from real photographs and
Yeah.
archival material and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's so cool. But the other thing, that you've done or you continue to do rather is you teach a nonfiction writing workshops for kids. You've taken workshops for Tulika summer camps as well in the past. I've had the privilege of sitting through some of them, and they've been so lovely to sit through and like to watch you kind of teach the kids the different sort of techniques and steps. So, what is that experience like for you in terms of teaching kids how to write in this space?
Yeah, that's very interesting because a number of them, at least the ones with Tulika, are all
Yeah.
online. and there are children from all over India. And it's quite fascinating to me how interested and involved they are in
Mm.
nonfiction. It's quite fascinating because and wanting to write
Yeah.
nonfiction, not
Yeah.
just read it. And again, the varied interests that they have.
Yeah.
They all come from spaces where they already have something that they are passionate about.
Mm.
There was a boy who was interested in space, and I could actually see in studying the stars, I could actually see a telescope in the back of his room. Very serious, and they are very serious about their writing,
Yeah.
which is very, very heartening because they read, and whatever information was given to them, whatever little assignments were given to them, they would do it to perfection and be there to present it and be very, very keen on feedback. So it gives me the idea that children are reading, they are interested, and writing very well.
Yeah.
Writing very well. And even after the workshop is over, I would get emails saying, look, how did I do in this? Or, do you think I could change this? Or someone sent me a piece of work saying, can you sort of help me out with this or analyze this or something? So it's not just that they have been put into that for a summer workshop. They are actually passionate about
Yeah.
what they're doing. So it's really, as a nonfiction writer,
Yeah.
it's very heartening, very, very heartening.
Yeah, no, because like I said, I sat in for some
Yeah,
of them, and I don't know how much you remember this, Devika, because the session I remember I sat in, you asked all these children, like, okay, like, what's something you want to write about? And someone said, oh, I want to write about what happened in Parliament today. Another one said, like, I want to, write about, space, I think was one.
yeah,
Then something about science, and it was insane. And I
yeah.
remember I was just sitting there, and I was like, kids are so smart today
Oh
about what
my
they want to
goodness.
write.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very focused,
Yeah.
very, very focused. There was no hesitation. Nobody actually had any doubts
Yeah.
about what they wanted to write about. They were very clear that this is my sphere of interest and I'm going to write about this.
Yeah, yeah. So
They were not
it's
nudged by anyone or anything like that. They were just there and
yeah.
yeah.
No, and it was lovely to watch how you were also gently guiding them in that sense. So, okay, try this, try that, and they were doing it. So, I mean, putting it out there, if we're doing more workshops with Devika in the future, which I think we definitely will be,
That'd be
please sign up.
nice.
They're really great.
Yes, please come. That'll be great. We'll have fun. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. But having said that, you've been writing for a couple of years now. What's a piece of advice or even say lessons you've learned you'd like to kind of share with aspiring writers out there?
Aspiring young writers or
Yes,
just, yeah,
aspiring
yeah,
writers in the nonfiction
yeah.
space, young and older.
There's a quote that I just ad nauseum quote every single time someone asks me this question, and that is, reading is the guru of writing.
Mm.
It really is. So I would say any aspiring writer, read, 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 and read. And again, I would, it sounds sort of counterintuitive because I'm a nonfiction writer and I read a lot of nonfiction. But much of my voice or whatever writing style or whatever is because of the fiction that I've read.
Okay.
So I would never say, please keep reading, your research or whatever it is. I would say read as much fiction as you can.
Yeah.
Because fiction is where you get an idea of, various kinds of writing, various voices, and that can really change it can really enhance your nonfiction writing if that's what you want. But
Mm.
any writer, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, journalism, anything, the basis of good writing is really reading.
Mm. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think reading can really do a lot for your craft,
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, on that lovely note, we've now come to the
Oh,
end of this book talk
so
session.
soon.
Yeah, I know it actually
Just
went
we
by.
were getting
We've been
started, I
speaking
thought.
for half an hour, but it really doesn't feel like
Oh,
that.
yeah, it has.
But no, thank you so much, Devika, for being here, and I think for being so willing to share about your journey and your process. It was so lovely chatting with you.
Thank you, Sangeeta, and thank everyone at Tulika for the wonderful work they do, and happy birthday again.
Yes, happy
Yeah.
birthday to us once more, and we
Here's
will
to
be
the
back
next
next year.
30 years.
Yes, yes, we'll be touching 30. I mean, we started our 30th year. We'll touch
30th
our
year.
30th year
Yeah.
next year. But yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining in.
Bye.
Bye.